So we've got to that point in the year where lots of parents are thinking about what they're going to do with their children in terms of starting school at reception. So we've invited Ben to answer a few questions. So Ben is the head at Frensham Heights School. So Ben, let's
I'm
look.
also a parent whose youngest has started reception not that long ago. So I'm going to come at that from both sides.
Excellent, ideal. So let's launch in. So first question, what would you say parents should consider when looking at schools for their young children?
For reception specifically, I think it's really hard because every school will be making huge promises to you as a parent of the human being that they're going to turn your young person into, what the product of that school will be. And so I think the key thing as a parent is you have to look beyond what you want right now, and you have to think about what you want your child's journey through school to be over the next 10 to 15 years, not just in the here and now. And the reason for that is because in many parts of the British education system, we've turned school into a production line where essentially the outcome of our children's schooling is a set of grades at 16 and a set of grades at 18 with access to higher education through those, and we define their entire life chances and success of their education quite narrowly through that prism. And the reason it's important to think about that is because when you choose a reception for your child, the messaging of that school system is going to start to imprint on your child from day one. So if the thing that you value most for your child, and this isn't my opinion, but there's nothing wrong with this opinion, is that the only part of their education that matters is those grades, those numbers, those letters, then the school you choose is going to start imprinting on your child that that's what's important to them, with statutory testing, with scores, with grades, with comparators, and the notion of academic learning being fundamental from day one. And we see this constantly with kids a little bit older, but who have been part of that messaging from a very early age. They start to believe also that that's the thing that's most important. And it is a really important thing, right? But when I chose for my children, the thing that was important to me in a world that is changing fundamentally around us was not necessarily that academics was the only sign of success. For me, the thing that was important for my children was that they could feel connected to the world. They could feel safe in the world, that they could feel connected to other people and have time to explore those connections, and that their natural intellectual curiosity would be nurtured. I didn't want for my kids to only learn the things that the curriculum lays out because that's what sits in the assessment and that's what's going to get them the best score. I wanted freedom for them to explore the things that they naturally wonder why about. And so when I chose a reception class for my kids, and when I think about what I want reception to deliver for kids at Frensham Heights, fundamentally it is having space and freedom to learn how to be a developing human being in the knowledge that if we get that right, the academics are going to naturally follow anyway.
So Ben, I suppose it is quite hard as a parent when children are 5 years old to start sort of imagining that far ahead. What would your advice to them be in terms of the kind of key things to look out for, and maybe what Frensham offers that stands out a little bit from the others?
So the first thing I say to any parent is you have to make a decision in line with your values. You want an alignment between the way you've raised your child for the last 5 years of their life and the way the school will contribute to raising your child in the future. And if your values align with the values of the institution, then you're going to have a much better journey. That for me is absolutely fundamental in the decision making. Do we do things differently here? Yeah, we do. And that's not just at surface level, but there's one very clear surface level indicator of the difference. And if you think about those day one photographs that we as parents sometimes post on social media, it's the 3rd of September, it's my child's first day at school. And in so many of those photographs, the child will be dressed up in the school uniform. You'll see like 5-year-olds in blazers and ties. It's probably the only time in their life when they're going to wear a tie other than the funerals, by the way. Stood on the doorstep, smiling nervously before their first day of school in a collar that's poking up into their chin. And at Frensham Heights, we don't do that. our first day of school photographs are kids wearing whatever the hell they want to wear on that given day. Kids in muddy jeans, kids in oversized hoodies, boys wearing dresses and girls wearing dungarees, because that's the thing that they picked out on that day, because that's the face that they want to share with the world as they build those connections. And like that, not having a uniform can seem quite superficial, but for me, that is a symbol of that point of difference, that your child as an individual is important here. That the work that you've done as a parent in raising your child to the point where you hand them over and trust them to the school is hugely important. We're not going to try and change your child. We're not going to stuff them into our uniform and values. And by the way, just think about that word uniformity. Who really wants uniformity for their child? We're going to work with who they are to make them the best version of themselves, aligned with who you are as parents. And it's a subtle thing, but it's a major point of difference, and it underpins the way we educate, it underpins the curriculum, it underpins the way we support and nurture children. And for me, it's hugely, hugely important.
Okay, great. You just mentioned the word curriculum. Obviously, what they learn in the classroom is always going to be important. I know we tried to do that a bit differently at Frensham. Can you talk a bit about that and the freedom that maybe the teachers have at Frensham?
Okay, well, there's two sides to this, right? Because when we talk about teachers having freedom, I've met some parents who assume that that means that their kids are going to be running around in the woods and they're not going to learn to read or write or count, and nothing could be further from the truth. But because we have relatively small class sizes, and because we do believe that education should not be a production line, a fundamental principle of our curriculum planning, particularly in reception, is the ability to learn in the moment. If there's a child in a room who has a particular interest on a particular day, we want to ensure that the teacher has the freedom to explore that interest with that child, to hang educational learning around whatever that particular moment of spark or interest might be, so that we're not forcing the kids down a path of learning these things. There are set things that they learn, I can come on to that separately, but also making sure there is the freedom, so that if we're learning some phonics, we have the ability, if there's a child who's particularly interested in trains or the railway network, then we can link the phonics work to that, so that they're exploring their interest at the same time as developing this core skill set, which of course is going to be fundamentally important in any education. But it's about not overemphasizing those markers, and it's about giving kids the breathing space to learn at their own pace. What we also then do within our curriculum across our junior school is, instead of saying that the things that are most important are reading or writing to a set standard against a set of standardized scores, and our kids do really well on that, don't get me wrong, we've built our curriculum around 3 core pillars that we believe are fundamentally important to understanding and navigating the world you're going to live in. People and society, the global environment, and human culture. And we have termly projects where kids will take a deep dive into one of those areas, so that they can understand the world they live in, so that they can understand its people, so that they can understand their place within that world, but also further their learning and gain independence and exploring that in a way that will really work for them. And their outcome on those projects is very much a project of their own design. So that we're not saying, here's an exam paper you must sit, we're saying, here's some deeper learning that you can explore, but how you express that learning can be much more personalized to you. And so again, it's giving them that freedom and that opportunity to explore areas of their own interest. And what we find through that is that against the traditional academic markers, they do just as well, if not better. But it's not about getting 75% in a geography test against a set of criteria, because that's what we've decided it must be today. And as an educational journey, we find that that is so much more natural. It's so much more engaging. Kids feel really connected and really engaged with their education, really motivated. And surely, if we think about reception as the starting point of 11, 12, whatever it is, years of formal education, being really highly engaged and motivated and valuing learning has got to be a fundamental.
Absolutely. Also, I think it's worth mentioning the other teachers that we have within the school. So I know it's not just limited to the teacher in the class. What do you have in terms of sort of further outreach?
Yeah, and again, this is emphasising that whilst I spent 20 years working in state education, I don't mean to talk state education down, but whilst literacy and numeracy are really important, and we make sure we develop those. They are not the only things which are important. And so we bring in specialist teaching in languages from reception age, specialist teaching in music, in drama, in performing arts, in art, in ceramics, in the kind of the creative subjects. And part of the reason for that is, if we think about the world our kids are going to live in, whilst of course we want them to be literate and numerate, the reality is the times in which they're going to pick up a pen and write something, or even sit at the computer and type something, are going to be highly, highly limited. Their world is going to be a world where we speak to one another, where they interact with technology, where they speak and listen far more than they read and write. But the thing that AI isn't going to be able to replicate is that human creative thought process. So by really taking a deep dive into creativity from a very early age, by emphasizing the importance of that, by developing their confidence in the world, their ability to interact on a human level, I firmly believe that we are setting them up far better for success in the world they're going to live in than is this traditional overemphasis on a narrow set of academic standards. It's maybe a controversial position, it's maybe a brave decision, but I think when we think hard about the world they're going to live in, it's quite a rational decision as well.
And we're set on an amazing site. I mean, how do the reception children get to benefit from all of that?
Yeah, we're really fortunate. We're in 120 acres of ancient woodland, and I've learnt this the hard way as an adult, that the importance of being outdoors and connected to nature in terms of human well-being. There's countless studies on it. It's not rocket science. Everybody knows it. But again, a school system which locks kids in classrooms behind desks for 8 hours of a day, 5 days a week, it's counterintuitive to that. So we're very fortunate that we've got this space to work with. On a Friday, our reception kids have their adventure day. They're outdoors all day. And the team link their learning outdoors to areas of the curriculum. So they'll be learning numeracy, they'll be learning literacy, but they'll be doing it outdoors, linked to the environment that we're in. We can take them, we'll pop in the minibus, we'll go off to other local places, we'll do things on site here. They'll get involved with gardening, with weeding, with growing vegetables. And very much in touch with nature and the outdoor world. But they also separately to that have forest school every week, and simply moving around this beautiful site. They're getting in touch with the outdoors, with nature. I feel like if a child goes home without muddy knees at the end of the day and without muddy hands at the end of the day, then maybe something's not been quite right in that day. And as a parent, I'm so privileged that I get to occasionally interact with my own kids during their school day. And I had a moment last week. It was a cold, murky Thursday afternoon with a bit of drizzle pouring down. And I took my dog for a walk in the woods in the early afternoon. And I bumped into my son, who's now in year 3, sitting by a campfire, toasting snippets of dough as part of an outdoor education lesson where they were cooking in the outdoors. And it just warmed my heart, because there's nothing, you picture rainy days in school and it's condensation on the inside of grey classroom windows, and all of the books feel slightly soggy. And to see him in the outdoors interacting in that way was just the most amazing feeling as a parent. I felt very lucky that I was able to give him that.
Brilliant. I think there's a couple of other things I just think worth touching on, actually. One is sort of some of the new facilities we've got outdoors, but also how that sort of leads into activity later on through the school.
Yeah, and again, I worry that I sound critical of other approaches here when I talk about this, but I believe it so firmly and passionately. And my session is not even the setup. Like sitting on my desk of books like this, Last Child in the Woods, about the importance of keeping kids in touch with nature. We have invested in our outdoor facilities. We've got a beautiful forest school. As they move up through the school, we've got Go Ape course. We've got mountain biking trails through the woods. We keep this rolling as they move up through the school, because the other thing is, once you lose it, it's hard to get it back. If you don't keep a child in touch with the outdoors through their early years, then by the time they're 11, 12, 13, and you then say, right, now you're going to go and do this stuff outdoors, anybody who's got a 13-year-old child knows that trying to get them to embrace a little bit of discomfort is not something that's easy. So it is a hugely important part of what we do, but it's also, for me, it's about creating a huge range of opportunities from the earliest possible age and rolling those opportunities through. It's why our younger students also have full access to a massive extracurricular program where every week they can be choosing a huge range of different activities they want to take part in. It's why our younger students also take part in organised sport right from the very beginning. And okay, our fixtures against other schools don't come in from year 4, but from reception they're doing games once a week. They're doing PE once a week. They've got opportunity to take part in football coaching, hockey coaching. I've just had to get my son his first mouth guard. I've got kids who hate sport, but they're still doing it and they're still engaged and they're finding things that they love. And actually, I had this amazing moment this week when my 11-year-old daughter turned around and said, for the first time ever, I'm looking forward to games afternoon because we're going climbing. And I love climbing. And okay, so she doesn't like netball, but she's found something that she loves. And so it's about immersion in that huge range of opportunities from the earliest possible age, keeping in touch with them, taking kids outside their comfort zone, but building an environment where they feel safe enough to step outside that comfort zone so that risk isn't too high. And it's a lovely place to be, full of kids with smiles on their faces. I'm sounding smug now, sorry.
No, I think that almost brings us full circle. But the world we live in today, we talk about everybody wants happy kids. And I think into that comes also this element of play. And maybe we can end on just some thoughts about why your child might be happy at a school like Frensham Heights.
Yeah, and I suppose it comes down to the fact, doesn't it, that as parents we look at the world and it can be a pretty bleak and scary place sometimes. And we can never fully protect our kids from that, nor should we. And I'll also be clear that a school which churns out kids who've been totally protected from the world and are naive to some of its risks and some of its darker sides has probably failed them because they're not going to be able to exist within that world. But at the same time, our school days are the only times in our lives where we have the opportunity to be truly happy, to be truly carefree, to exist in a microcosm of a broader community where we're in control of those elements, where actually kids are free to be kids and to be young for longer. And I think sometimes this world forces kids to grow up too fast. So making sure that we have the opportunity to drop everything and play together. Adults who embrace playfulness, adults who embrace their inner child as role models for kids, removing those social pressures to be cool and to grow up too fast. I think it's hugely, hugely important. And that's why, alongside structuring our curriculum and school around these principles, that's why we also take every opportunity to do that. That's why at Christmas we cancel everything and we hire a 50-foot Ferris wheel and snow machines and reindeer, and we just have a day of Christmas carnage together. And that's the 19-year-olds as well as it is the 5-year-olds. And they embrace it just like the 5-year-olds do. That's why, on Pancake Day, we cancel everything and have a pancake race and toss pancakes together because it brings joy. One of the fundamental requirements of human well-being is feeling connected to those around you and to the place that you're in. And that's why, again, when you're choosing a place for your child in reception, you've got to look at that place and say, do I feel connected to this? Will I feel connected to this? Will my child be building connections with these people, with the other kids? And will that be encouraged and will that be nurtured? Because fundamentally, schools that churn out statistics of the progress data that the other kids made, those aren't your kid. And in a world where 20% of children in schools in this country say they feel unhappy or very unhappy in school every single day, and those are verifiable statistics, that's a scary thing. And so for me as a parent, the question I'd be asking is, will my child feel connected? Will they feel valued? Will they be known for who they are and for the groundwork that I've laid over the last 5 years? And fundamentally, will they be happy?
Thank you, Ben.